This chapter was very enjoyable to me because you saw the Shandians and the Skypeans and the Straw Hats all put aside their differences for the greater good.
One Piece Chapter 300 Symphony!
Well, hello, my brothers and sisters of the Nerd Nation. I, as always, and for 300 chapters now, am Jim, here to bring you another review on the awesome and tantalizing adventure-filled, real-world ties and just emotionally driven tale of One Piece. Our last chapter, of course, saw things really starting to wrap up, and really ultimately it just being kind of from everybody's view and perspective, from Skypiea all the way down to Jaya, and everything in between, just kind of everybody hearing and just sort of basking in the sound of that golden bell finally being rung, and the symbolism that came with it, hopefully ending the war and bringing peace to a centuries-old war that really, in my opinion, is something that should have been healed and fixed and talked about, and if just some communication had happened, should have been taken care of years ago. But then we wouldn't have had this wonderful story, this wonderful arc, and this great tale. So, and this is a neat journey for me, because honestly, to be 300 chapters into something, and I know there's still 440 more to go as of this video, but nonetheless, though, for me, I think it's a nice accomplishment. I look back every time I hit a milestone like this, and I feel like I've gotten better at what I do. I feel like I have a better understanding of what's going on. I feel like we're all a lot closer now as far as just some of the different comments and things, and love them or hate them. Sometimes we have differences of opinion. Sometimes we agree wholeheartedly on things. We all have good days and bad days, but ultimately this chapter, in a lot of different respects, is just very cool because it just shows how everybody can put aside their differences for the greater good. And really, it's what I had been saying since this whole thing started, and we found out that the Shandians hated the Skypeans, and that Enel and his crew had taken over, and it was a whole different story, but, the Shandians pretty much just fought and killed anybody. And that's evidenced just by the first moment that they got to Skypiea. Wiper was just going around in the White Sea trying to sink ships, not caring who they were, where they were from, just blind hatred and anger, just killing and killing and killing just to kill. And that's the type of stuff, with the lack of communication that went on all throughout really this saga, this arc, whatever you would like to call it, that really, in my opinion, was one of the things that it bothered me. It brought out some emotions in me, because I look at it and I think, man, if you had just said, hey dude, this is what we're doing, like maybe this person would have listened, maybe they wouldn't have, but there was like lack of communication just throughout this arc, between the different parties. And it was really frustrating, because now all of a sudden, the golden bell rings, and everybody's been beat up, stabbed, beaten, dragged, knocked unconscious. Now a lot of them are back awake. And now, all of a sudden, is the time that everybody thinks that, hey, you know what, we should put aside our differences and just help each other out. And you see something early on in the chapter where they're asking, Chopper to go and check on, to check on Wiper. And Chopper's like, man, even his bones are broken and everything. Obviously, he used that reject dial 3 times, And you get Sanji and Zoro. They're like, wait, isn't that one of the gorillas, the guys that tried to attack and kill us the entirety of us being up here? And they kind of go back and forth about that, like, why should you help him? But ultimately, it's not about who you should help. It's about helping someone that's in need, okay? And you wind up seeing some of the Shandians go and loosen up a little bit, and the chief going and telling everybody, hey, just back off, calm down. We see something between Laki and Isa, where Laki brings her the bag of Verth that she had collected for, and Isa's got tears running down her face, and everybody's just happy and overjoyed to be alive at this point. We wind up seeing, too, the Shandians get together, everybody who's able-bodied enough to, and they're going to go and take the priests. Obviously, they've all been knocked out, Enel's priests, and they figure that when they wake up, they won't have the will to fight anymore, but they're going to just set them adrift in the White Sea on a cloud, So, very neat stuff there. As far as that goes, we wind up also seeing Enel in the arc Maxim. It actually comes back up, and Enel's like, oh, I don't need you people, there's nothing in the way for me now. And we see him go in his little crazed, lightning-filled ass go and sail off with the moon in his background to Endless Verth, or Fairy Verth, or whatever some people have called it. So I'm assuming that that's where he's going on this thing, and apparently because he is lightning and electricity, apparently he doesn't need to breathe, because once he gets out of the atmosphere, he's just going to fly to the moon, So, and I just couldn't help but think of "Fly Me to the Moon." Anyway, so a lot of you may be too young for that song, but you've probably heard it, and if you haven't, go ahead and look it up. So, so nonetheless, we see that, of course, Enel is actually alive. And just, again, really kind of everybody coming back together during the course of the chapter. Wiper wakes up at one point. He's like, oh, where am I? And they're like, you're in the ruins of Shandora. It's cool. Don't worry about it. And I like what the chief said. The chief was like, listen, everybody is being tended to. Everybody's being treated regardless of where they're from. And I thought that was a nice thing, and for those few of you that like to beat the drum for Wiper, saying that he was completely okay and everything was justified that he did, this is his own chief telling him, dude, back the fuck off, don't worry about it, okay? Everybody is helping each other out, we're not worried about fighting for once, alright? And then, of course, he's talking about how they got to recover the golden bell because it fell and everything else, and the chief says, just chill out, relax, all in due time. Right now, the neat thing is that not one person on Skypiea wants to fight, and there's a couple towards the end of the chapters, a couple of double-page spreads, man, of everybody partying, having a good time. The snake is having a good time, right? Nola, we found out its name was. Of course, he's excited, got to hear the bell again. Just everybody, the Skypeans that were almost wiped out. A lot of them are sad because there's no Angel Island to go back to anymore, but they're coming back to Upper Yard now, and it seems as if finally, after this centuries-old war that to me seemed very pointless in a lot of ways, has finally come to an end. They finally realized that this endless the Verth, the Upper Yard is for everybody, and it will withstand everybody, and everybody can get along with each other. We can all live with each other. We don't have to love each other, but we can still all live with each other without being at war constantly and there being bloodshed. The only thing that really detracted from me, and it did the same thing with the nonsense with Pell and Alabasta, is there's never any sacrifice. Nobody ever has to give anything, and that would be Conus's father, Pagaya. Thought that he was dead. It was nice to see Conus driven by what she thought was his death, and she really kind of muscled up and bared down and was able to go in and get the people of Skypiea assembled and try to get them on their way when they thought that the shit was going to hit the fan. She waited for them. She waited for the Straw Hats on the boat without turning tail and running, and everything else. And in my opinion, it was all done in the name of kind of like her father. You know what I mean? My father had stood up for me and stood in front of me and pushed me out of the way to get that blast. And it turns out he's alive. He just fell down, got knocked down to the White Sea or the White Sea and got back up. And honestly, you can say whatever you want, and oh no, and Oda does this so you can bring him back, but things like that to me are bullshit. There is no loss then. You don't have to go and kill off characters all the time, but in a huge arc like this, to think that nobody died, to think that the only one that we think might have died is that Yama that got his neck snapped by Nico Robin, and who even knows with that one, he may appear at some point too. That is really the only thing that I would say bothers me, and it's not something that detracts from my overall enjoyment, but again, when you're trying to go and make a person feel something, you make them feel that particular thing because of, a lot of times there's a loss, there's a give and take. If a person makes a sacrifice and then that goes and develops and helps to push another character for several chapters, 10, 20, 30, 40 chapters after that in a certain direction that otherwise would not have happened had that person not been lost, not been killed, right? And then you go and you bring him back and he's all smiling like nothing's wrong. Oh, hey, sorry. To me, it detracts away from those emotions that you wanted me to feel. Now I feel cheated and duped, and I feel like, really? Really? Just who cares? This was a nonsensical character anyway that didn't really have much bearing on the story whatsoever. But to me, Conus, a lot of the actions that she took were because of the loss that she experienced with her father. So it is what it is. That's how Oda does things. People have alluded to, that I'm going to be crying at some point in the future because there's, I'm assuming probably because there is some character deaths or maybe a major character that maybe one of the Straw Hats. I don't know. But the bottom line is as of right now, I think it's fairly weak to continually do that, and especially to go. There was no reason whatsoever to bring him back. To me, it would have been much more heartfelt if Conus was still there, celebrating Skypiea and not being destroyed, and then going and kind of almost like giving like a memorial to her father. My father who was brave and saved me and this and that. If only he could be here to see Skypiea, all coming together. to me, that would have been much more deserved than having him just appear. And then they have him appear too. It's like a joke. Everybody's like, talking to Conus about where's your father and this and that. And then there's different, pictures of the different Straw Hats going, oh my God, I'm so sorry and this and that. And then he pops up, Pagaya, and oh sorry. And they're like, you idiot, we're talking about you. And he's like, oh, excuse me for being alive. So to me, those things are cheesy, and regardless of your target audience and everything else, they're unnecessary. You can occasionally go and kill off a smaller character that didn't have any major bearing on the story because, in my opinion, it affected another character in the story. So that's it with that. But ultimately, we wind up seeing, and I thought it was pretty cool, at the end over here, you get, of course, Luffy is just in this last, let's party, and you just see everybody, panels and panels of everybody getting along, and it's so nice to see the Shandians, the Skypians, all of them getting along. At one point, somebody even calls Gonfall God, and he's like, no, don't even call me that. We're not getting into that shit anymore. It's all about people. And then I like this, too, the double-page spread right before that, where they're all just kind of chilling and partying, and they're saying about how nobody has the will to fight. And it's nice, because you actually see almost, it's not a mean grimace, it's almost a smile from Wiper, which I'm very excited about as well. So I feel like even when he woke up, he was still kind of like itching to fight somebody, but the chief was like, dude, just chill out, man. It's cool. Everybody's being treated, And I didn't even like, too, how, like, Zoro and Sanji were like, we don't need to help him and everything else. But then Zoro went and said something. He's like, you know what, though? He goes, even though this and that happened, I'm sure he had his reasons. So that was Zoro basically having forgiveness in his heart and going, you know what? I can forgive him for being short-sighted. I can forgive him for not communicating or for whatever it was, because he was battling his own demons, So I definitely liked that, and I thought that those things kind of came full circle. But ultimately, the chapter's about wrapping everything up in a nice, neat bow, and about everybody, just, including the Straw Hats, just partying it up, because Skypiea has been saved, Enel's ass is on his way to the moon, and that's where things leave off. So, my chapter question for you, though, brothers and sisters, is really about Enel and the whole moon thing. Am I mistaken in that, or am I assuming that because he was flying off and there's a giant moon behind him, that's where he's going? If so, is there any other information on this, or do we just assume that he just went to the moon and he no longer needs to breathe oxygen like the rest of the humans on this planet? Leave your answer to that question in the comments down below. Feel free to hit the thumbs up, the like button if you should think that I deserve it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. We'll look forward to catching you in the next one, Nation. What an amazing journey this has been, and we're not even halfway there yet, brothers and sisters. Thank you. Thank you for everything.